welcome to You Make the Difference. I'm Wanda Walker, and today we're talking to Phillip Shoemaker, who has written a book called Covenant of Acceptance. Before we get started, Phillip, tell us about you and your background, and maybe the background of the book.
Okay. My wife and I have lived here in LaGrange for 12 years. It's the longest we've ever lived anywhere. I was involved in Christian education for 25 years, pastored for 10 years. Moved up here from Columbus to help out with West Georgia Christian Academy, and then ultimately we retired. We have 4 children in Atlanta and 3 grandchildren in Atlanta, so
Yes.
It's nice to be relatively close, you know, keep in touch and see them and everything. We have, over the years, we've had the opportunity to minister in many different ways. This book that I wrote initially, I wrote a book about 15 years ago. And it went back to 33 years ago. We were in Augusta. I was a principal of the school in Augusta. And my wife was afraid she was going to have a migraine. She's had prime migraines, and it was so serious she was concerned. We went to the emergency room. It was then the doctor's hospital. And while we were there, her foot was dragging, her face was dropping, or had slurred speech. And they brought in a neurologist. He checked her out, and he said, "I don't think there's anything wrong with your wife." I said, "I think it's psychotic." So we said, "Okay." He said, well, go check with your doctor and run some tests, see what they can find. So the next day we went and put her in the hospital, and 2 hours later I got a phone call. The first test they had run, they found that she had a tumor in the middle of her brain.
Wow.
It was a walnut-sized tumor in the middle of her brain. They considered it inoperable. Actually, they told us later they gave her 4 months to live. So she was in the hospital 9 days. They let her out on a Wednesday. On Friday, she had a final CAT scan, and they were going to put a probe into her brain. I don't know why, but doctors, they're going to put a probe in her brain on Monday to confirm the diagnosis. And that Friday, the technician said, "You might get a call from Dr. Eppel," who was the brain surgeon. And that Saturday afternoon, we got a call, Dr. Eppel. He said, "We've canceled the surgery." So why'd you cancel the surgery? He said, "Well, the tumor's gone."
Wow.
So we rejoiced. We gave praise to God, and everybody was excited. Her parents had come down from North Carolina. They were excited. Her brother and his family had come from South Carolina. They were excited. And we were praising God. And then my wife went into the front room and couldn't figure out what was going on. So I went in and talked to her and realized that she was upset. She was crying. She was mad at God because God took her tumor away.
Wow.
And that was like,
Normally
normally you don't get upset when God takes the tumor away,
Yes.
Inoperable brain tumor. So we couldn't figure out what was going on, didn't quite understand why that was happening. Though over time, we realized it was because she had a spirit of rejection and felt rejection her whole life. Her father was not somebody that showed love. He was a good man. He was a Christian man, but he never showed love. He never told her he loved her. She'd go into a closet and take his coat, wrap it around her, and imagine her father was giving her a hug.
Yes.
And so all that rejection, all that feeling bad about herself and not feeling valued, when she had the tumor, everybody was there for her. Her parents were there for her. Her brother was there for her. Her husband was there for her.
Yeah, showing her that she was loved.
She was loved, she was important, and she had value.
Yes.
And God took it away.
Wow.
So she was, so she would rather have a terminal disease if she could have attention and love and acceptance.
Yes.
So over time, as a pastor in Columbus, I addressed the issue and I made a covenant with her. On Mother's Day sermon, at the end of the sermon, I made a covenant. I called it the Covenant of Hosea, based on Hosea 3, 1-5, where it talks about God told Hosea, "Go love your wife again." And so in front of the congregation, I made this covenant. And the covenant was, "I accept you for who you are and not who I want you to be. I love you unconditionally. Nothing you have done in the past, today, or forever will change my love for you." That was the covenant I made with her. Now, prior to that, I
She's
didn't.
in the audience, by the way. So,
Yes, that's what I was
yeah,
looking at.
Yeah.
And prior to that, a couple days before, I actually told her about what I was going to do. And I said, I want to do this as your father. Her father had passed. But I said, I want to make this commitment as your father, not just as your husband. And she just wept openly,
Yes.
you know. And so at that time, I wrote a book called The Covenant of Hosea. And God blessed that. We had a great, a great experience. Following that, they started giving her Dilantin, which is a strong anti-seizure drug. And about a year or so later, we went back to Dr. Eppel and said, what about, being pregnant, and having a baby? She said, no, you don't want to do that. You're going to have, called birth defects, called seizures because of the medicine. And I'll never forget the little twinkle in his eye when he realized we weren't talking about doing it. We were talking about, we've done it.
Oh, yeah.
And he kind of like backed off and said, well, okay, we'll do what we have to do. And they weaned her off the Dilantin. The first doctor we went to about the pregnancy said, you need to terminate the pregnancy.
Oh, wow.
He looked at the records. He said, your wife's going to have seizures and your baby's going to have birth defects. So we went through the crisis pregnancy and all the classes and all that. In the end, we did have a healthy baby. Healthy Jessica was born.
That?
Praise
Yes.
God. Second miracle. Even though it was hard. It was hard for my wife. One day I came home from school and everything in the kitchen that was in a cabinet was on the floor.
Huh.
She kind of had a moment.
Yes.
A little stressful moment.
Yes,
you know.
really.
But, we had a healthy Jessica, and God blessed that. Over the years, the Lord blessed that ministry, blessed that book, blessed the opportunity to show acceptance and to her. But in the end, I realized it wasn't enough. Because I can say I accept you for who you are, and I accept you in the midst of your failure. I accept you in the midst, and I'm still going to love you unconditionally, but I'm still seeing the failure. I'm still seeing, I'm putting expectations, I'm putting demands on you. You're not meeting them, and I'm still accepting you. I'm still loving you unconditionally, but I'm still seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that wasn't enough.
Yeah.
That,
How long ago was that?
that was about 2 years ago. We began to realize that I began to realize I needed to do something different.
Yes.
So Christmas 2 years ago, we were getting ready to go see her mom, who at that time lived in Columbia, South Carolina. My brother lived in Rock Hill, South Carolina. We were going to go on a trip. And, it's always a big thing. We did all the packing ahead of time. We did the preparation ahead of time. We thought we had checked the Magellan and everything was all set. And I told her at that time, I said, no matter what happens tomorrow going on a trip, I said, I'm going to see you as complete and perfect and righteous without fault or failure. And the reason I said that was I came to realize that as the bride of Christ, God looks at me that way.
That's right.
He sees me as complete and perfect and righteous without fault or failure. That's the new covenant message. That's what he says. He said, I'll see your sins no more. Blessed is the man whom the Lord will never count his sins against him. And so I was seeing myself that way, and I said, well, I need to see my bride that way.
Yes.
And I wish I'd picked a different day.
Things didn't go well that
Didn't go well. We got up. Now, ahead of time, I'd taken my keys. I put them in the refrigerator with her medicine, so we'd make sure we had her medicine. Mm-hmm. And so we got up, repacked everything, make sure she had the pillows she likes and all this. And we got in the car. Now, the dogs were in the house. The cats were out of the house. So every time we went through the door, we had to make sure the dogs stayed in the house, the cats stayed out of the house. And so we finally got in the car, sat down, and didn't have my keys. Where are my keys? Oh, they're in the refrigerator. So we went in, got the keys, got back in the car again. Then my wife said,
The keys were in the refrigerator?
So that I would remember to get her medicine.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
We did the same thing at Christmas this time, and I still couldn't remember they were in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Had the same problem. But we got in the car, getting ready to go, and she didn't have her Kindle. Has to have her Kindle.
Yes.
Got to play games.
Yes.
Okay. Get in the house, leave the cats out, dogs in. She goes in the house, finds her Kindle. We get out, we get ready. the Magellan's not working. So she had printed out a map. We couldn't find a map. Go in the house looking for the map. Couldn't find a map.
Dogs in, cats out, so it's not like going in, house out. It's dogs in, cats out.
So we looked for the map, couldn't find a map. Got on the computer, made a new map. And then I hit the button that said, going to test, had to do a test on the computer, 5%, 10%, So anyway, we finally got the map, okay. I actually, even to do that, I had to call my brother, make sure we had the address right, okay. So we'd already been in the house, in and out. We'd been down the driveway and up again, because we'd forgotten things. And then, so it's been a couple hours.
Oh, wow.
So finally, we're heading north.
Yes.
We're in Noonan. My wife turns to me and says, I didn't put any food out for the dogs. So we had to turn around, go back. We had to wait till the next day to go. But I turned to her and I said, you are complete and perfect without fault or failure.
Yay.
And the amazing thing, Wanda, is that over time, God changed me. That's what the new covenant says. God says, I'm going to change you on the inside.
Yes.
And so on the inside, I was changed. So I no longer reacted to things that she did. We used to joke about, okay, dear, I love you, no problem, and all that. And there's no more, And even this week, there's something happening. The next day, I went back and said, gee, I didn't even get upset about that. I didn't even respond negatively about that.
That's awesome.
And that's the message of the new covenant, that God changes you on the inside.
Yes.
But it's how God views you and how you view others. If I view my wife as complete and perfect and righteous without her fault or failure, though she gets a little grumpy, it changes who I am.
Yes.
And it changes how I respond to her.
Yes.
And that's the important thing.
Yes.
That's the important
thing.
thing.
And I've seen you go through that process some because, I heard what you had discovered with the Hosea covenant and those kinds of things, and I heard you talk, and then now I hear you talk a different way, and it's a much better way, a more excellent way.
Oh
isn't
my,
it?
amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Yeah.
Now, let me say one more thing about that is that after this happened, the next, in February, I was at a men's meeting and had the opportunity to give a little bit of a testimony. And I told the men, I said, my goal, the reason I made that commitment was I recognized the only way I was going to be one with my wife was if I looked at her as complete and perfect and righteous.
Yes.
Because if you have the idea, well, we're going to be one because you got your responsibilities and I have my responsibilities, and if you fulfill your responsibilities and I fulfill my responsibility, you play your role, I play my role, and we complete, then we'll get closer and closer and we'll be, never works. Because no matter what the expectation I have on her, she fails. No matter what expectation I put on myself, I fail.
Yes.
And so I recognized that wasn't happening. But my goal was to be one with my wife. That's what God says. That's what we're to be. We're to have a oneness. And so I sensed that happening. We both sensed that happening. And so I challenged the men at this dinner, and I said, Malachi says, the people challenge God. God, why are you not accepting our offering? And he said, well, we're not accepting. God says, I'm not accepting because you haven't shown love to your wife. Your wife, you haven't shown, haven't been committed. And my intention was that you be one in spirit and body, that you might raise godly offspring.
Yes.
And the challenge was my daughter, Jessica, who God had delivered, was having some issues with her mother. Mom was in the hospital for a day for a procedure, and I asked her, are you going to go see your mother? And she said, no, I hate her and she hates me. And it was like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Yes.
Dear old dad, it's over his head. He doesn't see anything.
Hadn't even picked up.
Hadn't even picked up on that, And so, and I went back to Mom and said, what's going on? She said, well, I never did show her the love. That spirit of rejection was going to that generation. And so here was this conflict. And so I prayed that God would change my daughter's heart. And God changed where she worked. She moved to Atlanta, changed her job. She was able to get involved with a church, got involved with a phenomenal church, to the point she came down and set up an iPad for me and said, here's the podcast. And she sent me texts, here, you need to listen to this sermon, And then one day she sent me a text and said, you and Mom need to listen to this sermon. And I'm going to listen to it again. And God has just the right family for us.
Oh,
God has that controlled.
yes.
And God changed her heart. And the next time she came down from Atlanta, she gave her mother a rose.
Oh,
Gave her mother a rose.
yes.
God was touching my daughter because we were becoming more one. And I mean, and the thing about this book is that it deals with some principles like that can affect relationships when it comes not just to the wife, but to the family and to others. We were at a seminar last month, and one of the ladies came up that was familiar with the book, and she said, "This book will save marriages."
Yes.
And that's what I want from this book, that it would touch lives and save marriages. Phillip Yancey, I quote in the book, Phillip Yancey says, every year there are new how-to books on marriage. Mm-hmm. And all these Christians buy all these how-to books on marriage. And he says, I've never seen any change in the divorce rate among the book-reading Christian public.
Oh, really?
So I'm praying that this book, we're praying that this book would be something that changes that it does change marriages, does affect and improve marriages.
Yes. And there's another book that that you think that everybody ought to read by Carolyn Leaf. Tell me about that book.
Yeah, I had been working on redoing the book I had originally and had it written. It was all done.
Yes.
7 chapters. And then I came across Caroline Leaf, Christian neurologist, came across her writings and had to rewrite the whole book, rewrote the whole thing. She's written a book, Who Switched Off Your Brain? The Mystery of the He Said, She Said. What a strange name. Who switched off your brain? The mystery of the he said, she said. And as a neurologist, she talks about how that men and women are different. Our optic nerves are different. We see things differently. And she looks at the relationship that we have. I know one of the quotes she makes is that I can't be the real me. You can't be the real you apart from your spouse. And that God makes us complementary, not contrary to one another. And that God gives gifts and abilities and principles for your spouse that you would not have. And boy, I tell you, we have seen that. My wife, a number of times, has tried to warn me about decisions that I was making.
Yes.
You know, when we were in Augusta, we had this old station wagon, and the men in the school board were so concerned about our old station wagon, they said, we need to get you a new car. And what they didn't know was that there was a piece of oak holding the rear end together. And so it was worse than they imagined.
Yes.
So they got us, they found a car. And in fact, they even gave me the money to buy the car. And my wife looked at that car and she said, I don't feel good about this car. So we shouldn't buy this car. I said, well, they gave us the money. They picked the car, No, I don't feel good about this car. Boy, was she right about that. That was a lemon. We spent thousands of dollars on that car. And in the end, we drove it into the parking lot of a dealer, and it died again. We had to actually push it into a parking spot.
Yes.
But she was right about that car, and I said, well, how would you know that, Well, later, when we were looking at a school position, we were getting ready to drive to the church, and I'd already met with the people there. They'd already accepted me.
Yes.
I just had to meet with the elders and get things confirmed. And we're driving half a mile from the church, and she turns to me and says, I don't feel good about this. We shouldn't go here.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, what do you mean? What? Not again?
You'd already committed.
Had already met with them. I mean, we hadn't committed, but we'd met with them. They'd already kind of accepted us. It was just more of a thing just to do it. And I said, no, we need to do it. They're and I gave her all the reasons, and we stayed, and we went there, and I transformed the school. I mean, they hadn't had school was 8 years old. They only had one person graduate and go to college and complete college.
Oh, wow.
And the first year I was there, we had 14 out of 15 seniors go to college.
Yes.
And the SAT, this is back years ago, but the SAT, the only person with SAT over 1,000 was my daughter. The highest SAT they had was 1,000. 2 years later, we had 1,100.
Wow.
And we added a library, we added a kindergarten. I did a lot of things. But they changed their governance to where it was run by the elders. The elders had absolute authority. And the elders view themselves as the voice of God. And I had an elder that I had conflict with because he wanted to do something special for his daughter in the school situation. And I said, that, you don't treat somebody special just because you're the elder's daughter. And I fought him against that, and he got me fired, in spite of what I did there. And here my wife had said, I don't feel good about that.
It's going to be rough.
And you wonder, you go back and you say, wow, what if I'd took her advice? What if I had said no? Then it would have been up to God to provide another opportunity. And you wonder, what opportunities did I miss because I didn't listen to my wife?
Yeah, and Carolyn points out differences between men and women. You want to share what those differences are?
Well, they include, even at the cell level, the response of a woman's cells is different than that of a man's. And how you think and process in your mind is different. I mentioned the optic nerve is different. I always say we go to Walmart. Years ago, we went to Walmart, and I finally decided that there was no way that I could ever control my wife when she goes to Walmart. Any time restraint I put on her was a waste of time. So I finally just said, I'm never going to do that. I'm just going to sit here and wait. Well, then I read, Dr. Lee's book, and she basically says, men are hardwired. They go to the store, they get what they need, they come out. Women are hardwired to shop. There are just certain things that women are hardwired and good at.
Yeah.
That men are not, And so I said, yeah, well, you're right about that, But she does a real good, synopsis of how people view things differently, how you need both. You need both. And so often, we just have this opinion that I'm the husband, I'm in charge, I'm the voice of God. Just like those elders. The sad thing about that school is they built a lot. They built a gym, they built classrooms, and the school closed.
Wow.
After I left.
Yeah.
And the school closed because the elders were trying to run things, and they looked at themselves as the voice of God. They had such an opinion as elders, so much authority, that they literally could have sold the property, split up the money, and nobody could have said anything.
Yes. Phillip, I want you to look at the chapter titles that you cover and tell us what those chapter titles are, because I think it takes you through your process.
That's true.
Of coming to adore your bride. And so if we could just read through those, and maybe if you want to comment a little bit, or maybe just the reading of them.
Yeah, it is. They are kind of unique. The first was the covenant of acceptance, which was when it talks about that Sunday Mother's Day commitment that I made to my wife and why I did that. And it goes back to the issue of performance. I was gauging her on her performance, and she was falling short. And God doesn't judge us on our performance, because we'd always fall short, and the importance of looking at people apart from performance.
She was falling short of your expectations.
My expectations of her. And if I'm going to base my love and my acceptance of her based on her performance, never works.
We never make it.
Never make it. And the same thing for her, looking at me. And the same thing in the church. We look at people in the church. We always have judgment and decisions and expectations, and we judge people and they fail, and then we go, and that's why performance never works.
It doesn't.
It has to be unconditional. The next one is baseball bat theology. Baseball bat theology. And basically what I meant by that was, I grew up when I was going in high school, went to youth meetings, and they talked about children, obey your parents in the Lord. Boom. Husbands, wives, obey your wife. Boom. And it was like having a baseball bat. You need to do this. You need to do this. You need baseball bat theology. And so I talk about why that doesn't work and why that's wrong. Number 3, I talk about teaching the toughest lesson, and that's the lesson of holiness. How do you teach somebody holiness? How do you convey that to somebody? And I use the illustration of Paul and how he teaches it, and Jesus, how he taught it. And so that's a very important chapter. Chapter 4 is the necessity of the Father's love. And that goes back to my wife and the fact that she had this rejection. And I mean, in the studies that have been done about the need of the Father and love, there was a study done that was, they took 100 different studies and looked at why a father is important and what happens if you don't have a father in the house. And it talks about delinquency, it talks about addiction, it talks about all these personality issues and conflicts that occur if you don't have the father's acceptance. Mm-hmm. And of course the issue is, and this is what my wife has faced, her view of God, the Father, was determined by her view of her father.
That's right.
And there's such a danger, such a problem with that when we look at things that way.
Yes.
You know, we need to see God, the Father, as He is, not how we view our fathers, because our fathers always fail. The necessity of the Father's love, the unexpected consequences of rejection. Here were health issues that my wife faced because of rejection. It's kind of interesting. We talked to some of our church members, talked to the church about how that God had touched her life regarding rejection because she dealt with the issue of rejection. And we had a pianist, and she had arthritis in her hands, even though she was a pianist.
Yes.
And walked with a cane. And she wasn't there when I talked about it, but she listened to the tape. And she realized that, you know, she had some issues of bitterness and anger in her life. And she was a school secretary, so she had some days off, and she took time to go through her life and deal with the bitterness and anger that she felt. And then she told me on a Friday morning, she had one issue, and it went back to when she was 5 or 6. Her husband didn't know anything about it. Nobody else knew anything about it, but she had to deal with that issue. And she said, I'm not going to get up off my knees until I got this resolved. And she dealt with it. Well, the next Sunday night, she said, I want you to pray for me about my hands. And so I prayed for her about her hands, not knowing what she had done on that Friday. And then the next Tuesday, we get a phone call from her. My hands. All the arthritis was gone.
Yes. We're not going to have time to go through the other.
We're going to have to do it again.
Yes, we'll have to do it again, or you'll have to get the book.
Or get the book. There you go.
So please contact Phillip Shoemaker. We'll have his information on the screen, and get your copy of Covenant of Acceptance. And we thank you for watching. You make the difference. And remember, you truly do. Fathers, tell your children you love them.
Amen.